What's up, everybody? I'm Rich Wilson, founder and filmmaker of Vibe Media, where we help your brand build to an influencer level online presence using filmmaking tools and tips to tell your story. We have yet another episode of Vibe Check today, and in this episode, we are talking video games. Yes, you heard me right. You're probably thinking, wait a second, a movie and filmmaking podcast talking about video games? Well, in the new age of where art and technology increase at an explosive rate, video games have become a great source to learn great storytelling, but we can also appreciate the cinematography that goes into some of our favorite game franchises. Now we talk about that and much more, so with that, on with the episode! Hey everybody, welcome to Vibe Check, the podcast for aspiring filmmakers and film enthusiasts. I'm Rich Wilson, the director and president? No, founder of Vibe Media, and I'm here with
Dana
and Forrest.
Oh,
how's it going?
Hey guys. Well,
we're waiting for Rich to do some elaborate intro, and it was just kind of for
I know,
our names, kind of just generic. So sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, well, you know, Dana, who is our producer and client relations here, and Forrest, who is our director of photography,
cinematographer extraordinaire.
Yes,
That's right. Give us our titles.
Yes.
Throw some respect on my name.
I earned it.
Yes.
Okay.
You both definitely have. Well, we talked a couple weeks ago about some of the controversies, and we talked about Sonic, and we really wanted to talk about video games, video games that turned into movies, also the filmmaking that actually goes into video games as well. Some of the video games that we all love. We've got a few things here and there. If you're watching us on our YouTube, on the video podcast, we'll see.
We'll pan across some game covers of some games we're going to talk about. I'm a little. These are all my PS4 games, so it's we're not discounting Xbox. We still have a couple of games we're talking about. Some Nintendo stuff. So we're going to cover it all, but don't come at me. I have a PS4.
You can come at me. I have both, and I'm much more of a Sony person than
Perfect.
Microsoft now.
Perfect. I'm not alone.
Come for me. I'll die on this hill.
Story-wise, I think, yeah. Okay. But yeah, I think we wanted to bring this up. I actually originally brought this up to you guys both because I was playing actually this game right here, Detroit Become Human, which if you guys have not played it, I definitely recommend playing it here. It's not only graphically amazing for what it is. I mean, from the start menu, you're greeted with a character that you start to grow fond with, knowing that she's a robot, things of that nature, but they just make it so realistic. But as you're playing throughout it, it's just because of the graphics being so good, you will get lost in these worlds.
I love that.
And I think that's the biggest thing as a gamer, is when games itself can truly just suck you into this world that you forget that you're playing a game, or you feel like you're absolutely in direct control of a movie, which is kind of the fascinating thing about video games.
Well, I think also with video games, they have more time to really develop a lot of story. Because if you think about a lot of movies, especially if they're not doing a saga like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have about maybe 2.5 hours to complete and bookend to bookend to create a great story, which can sometimes be challenging. But with video games, you could go 10, 20, 30, 50 hours.
80 hours?
Yeah.
80 hours,
Sometimes
About?
even
What
more.
games are you playing?
Yeah.
Well, the story of games is typically...
Yeah, the story can... If you just go by the story,
Yeah.
you could get it done in probably 15, 20 hours. But if you're playing all of the different wonderful things that they do in video games, the side missions, the exploration, you could be on it for hours and hours and hours,
I'm not a math person. That's like 800 times more, whatever it happens to be. It equates to something ridiculous.
Absolutely. Like one of my favorite sagas, Assassin's Creed saga, amazing games that I have loved ever since the first one when it came out. And Forrest, you're absolutely right. You get lost in these worlds to where now it's just, with the technology getting greater, the maps get bigger and you spend more time in these amazing worlds where you're just exploring so much. You could explore Sparta, you could explore ancient Egypt, the Renaissance.
Shout out to Ezio, my boy.
Yeah, Ezio, man.
He's my boy.
They're nerds.
Dude, the greatest assassin
I love it.
in all of the games. Obviously, Ezio Auditorio del Firenze. You know, I totally.
Fancy.
Oh yeah, you know. L'Ecclesiastica di Pace. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's something
The
that
only Italian I know.
that games have
Is
been
rest in peace.
games have been getting so much better at this lately too. I mean, you can go back to the age-old days of, we have some examples here of, Zelda,
Oh my gosh.
the basics of Nintendo. Those games always, Zelda has such a big lore around it. Mortal Kombat, even a fighting game, has a fantastic lore. That's why the movies in the 90s, perfect movies by the way, are so great.
Or Resident Evil, too.
Resident Evil, yeah, another great
Best movie
quadrilogy.
series
How many is there? Six
There's
now?
7.
Okay,
yeah,
I was like,
not including the remastered ones they're working on. I think they just finished 3. So
Yeah.
technically more like 10.
I mean, and that just goes to show you that these games that create these feelings for people can be turned into movies, but still have even more behind the scenes when new games come out. You're getting another 20 hours of this world that you've lived in. I think, they're going back and doing reboots of things. I know back in 2013, I want to say it was, Tomb Raider. They went and redid the Tomb
Right.
Raider
Yeah, you're right.
games. And let me tell you, going back to that first Tomb Raider that they redid, there's a moment in there where you're playing as her, fighting for her life, and you experience having to actually kill somebody for the first time. And the way that whole segment was shot, the way that you could feel her anxiety because you're in control of that character, you're having to mash buttons, you're having to hide, it just puts you in that state of mind, even from the comfort of your own couch. And it's just brilliant. It's you can't recreate it. It's being in control of a movie.
I love the feeling of killing a man.
Oh.
Kidding!
Yeah, she's kidding.
Guys, if we disappear, you know who did it.
Yeah.
So
You think I'd
On
be
next
traceable?
it's
Come on.
it's on tape. So
On next week's
yeah.
episode is like, hi, I'm Dana, and I am the founder of.
I am the captain now.
But yeah, I mean, I know that as I said, I'm a huge gamer. That's why I go a lot of PS4 and stuff too, because they do have such strong first-party games and exclusives.
Speaking of PS exclusive, Last of Us.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Genuinely.
I love that game.
The Last of Us is good. I think, I'm with Dana a little bit. Like, it didn't strike me as... I guess I just wasn't invested in that game, per se. I think...
I totally was.
I have seen that story so many times with zombie things. I think being...
Yeah, but
It was a
that.
different take on the zombie genre necessarily, but for me, it was The Last of Us Part 2 that kind of took me off of the franchise a little
Really?
bit.
See, I haven't even played that one
It was beautifully well
yet.
done.
Yeah.
So beautifully well done, but it just was throwing so much at you, like cultural problems, social problems, and like all this stuff, and it just felt like I could just be scrolling through Twitter and seeing all the same stuff. Like, I want to get lost in a world. I don't want to take these real world issues and put it into a game.
Interesting
like, there's
perspective.
More stuff going on.
Sure.
Like, you got to fight for your life. Like,
But think about how brilliant that first game was.
Oh, it was amazing.
And just the story itself. And then again, like we talk about the technology, how it continues to grow and grow. And we're talking about in this episode the filmmaking inside of video games with Last of Us, with some of these others, with even Tomb Raider.
Noire even.
You actually had actors
In
bodysuits going through these sequences in motion cap rather than in a sound booth, trying to go,
foiled my plans again, Batman.
yeah, exactly, right?
And this is the best example that I keep bringing this game back up, because this is a game that, I don't know if I've kind of explained this to you guys here. You essentially play as 3 different characters throughout the game. They're robots, but they're kind of going through this process of learning that they're human. They have human-like they feel, they have these scared emotions.
They have human tendencies.
But the great thing about this game is, yes, they used real actors with motion capture to do this, but this is kind of a choose your own adventure game. So your
love those.
actions actually influence the rest of the story, to the point where you can even have a character die and not be able to play as that character for the rest of the mainline story.
I think the people who made this game were the same people who made Heavy Rain
And
a few years ahead.
They may have been here. It is
Because it's the exact same setup that you play as like 6 different characters in that game. And if you choose the wrong choice or whatever, that character dies, or it's always a different outcome.
Well,
for
also
the
kind of
ending.
reminds me of like the Mass Effect series, the big trilogy.
Well, and it's just like that. I mean, to the point where they've filmed each one of these actors for each one of these scenes, and especially for quick time events, things like that, they've planned an actual consequence for each thing. If you miss one punch, your character gets knocked into a wall, which knocks over something else, which does so. It's they have to do 6, 7 takes for each one QuickTime event, and then based on this branching path, if you made a choice 3 chapters ago,
Right.
in this way, then it's happening now as you go back to this character. So there's 500 different outcomes that they had to film for this, which just goes to show you the time and effort that goes into it, but also replayability, the actual effect. This is one of those games that you have an actual direct effect of feeling like you're creating the movie, because every person can play this game and you would get a different ending, a different experience out of it. It's not as much as a Spider-Man or Avengers. All those things have a story, but those are set stories. You're always going to be playing through that story.
games.
Right. But there's also still beauty in that as well, and they do that so great. You bring up Spider-Man, great game. I'm almost done with it. As far as this recording, maybe when 2 episodes from now, I'm actually done with the game. I don't know. We'll see. But as far as this recording, I have not finished the game all the way through. And then the Avengers game coming out, like those are some really great, beautiful stories. Uncharted, another great series with some great storylines. But I think even like with the games that we're talking about, like that's like the future. Like we are. I'm a huge nerd, right? I love the whole.
You don't say.
Yeah, like I love a lot of geek stuff, right? Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, video games, Zelda, you name it. I'm probably, have had some kind of fandom. But again, going to Star Trek, holodecks, recreations of different worlds and immersive, and you're just in a size, like a room about the size of our small little studio here that we're, filming our videos and our podcast, right? It's... we're not that far away, with the technology of VR games and holograms. Those are going to probably in the next 15, 20 years meld together to where we go into rooms and we are immersed into an entirely different world. Heck, you've got VR games that you buy vests now, and if you get punched in the game, you feel it.
Reacts it.
Whoa, what?
Yes. Yeah.
Ugh.
And they have those stations now that have like a bowl in the center, so when you walk, you actually have to walk on it to make your character walk. But
Interesting.
because you're wearing like socks and a bowl,
It's
you're staying in one place, but you feel like you're walking, like because you're actually moving your character.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know it was going that far already.
And Dana and I, we are on this weekly streaming show called Crash Landings, and recently, a few weeks back, we've actually started doing some VR stuff in the episode. It's literally just like a mixture of like Monty. It's like Monty Python's Flying Circus and SNL and just literally whatever we come up with. That's what our show is about, and it's an hour long. And we were just like, hey, let's do some VR reactions, and so we started doing that. But it was the first time I really did any VR, and it is intense how immersive you can get into something where I'm thinking, again, I'm a total nerd. Again, this may go to anime, but I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is Sword Art Online, getting close to it.
If only.
Well,
If only, right?
well, and it makes you
Someday.
wonder, bleeding into this, if that's going to be the new way that movies are experienced. If they're going to start filming movies where you're in first person point of view for some people, or
Yeah,
how that would
interesting.
work.
They already are on Netflix. They had the Man versus Nature or whatever that Bear Grylls show is. You can literally, it's an interactive show. You go through and you make the choices
okay.
for him.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, they have like a Minecraft one
Or
that,
the
that my
Black
kids have
Mirror.
done.
Black Mirror,
Yeah,
yeah.
Bandersnatch.
Black Mirror
or
and
whatever.
Whatever that
Well,
was, yeah.
and even again, this is just a couple of years ago. Ready Player One was filmed in virtual reality. You know, Steven Spielberg and all of the actors, they put on VR sets and headsets, and they were filming the sequences in the virtual world. You know, they had like a mock-up. It wasn't anything, great what we saw in the end product, but you had the gist of, oh, you're in Z's garage, right? With all of hers, cars and vehicles and whatnot, and the big iron giant, and they were interacting. They were actually walking through. They were, if you take it off, they were just in this big old warehouse, but they were filming everything in that virtual world. He was directing in the virtual world. Amazing technology.
Well, and the technology now with those headsets, they can scan the room and actually make the environment that you're in virtual reality and fit in that room. So if there is a wall in your room, it'll actually generate a wall there. So you don't walk into a wall while you're wearing this headset. So things are getting crazier and crazier.
Oh, yeah.
Every day. Part of it's exciting. I think it's really exciting to see the way that we're going to be able to adapt to this, how it's going to be used. Part of me still hopes that we can keep that simplicity. I mean, I still remember, we had mentioned Zelda earlier. Zelda is still one of my favorites for there being a main character that doesn't talk. Like, Link does not talk at all. But
He grunts. What are you
he
talking
runs
about?
and grunts and swings his sword. But he's definitely that whole lore of that game is amazing, and for it to be kind of a similar story that's retold in several different ways, but they continually flip it on their head, different art styles, different generations of Link.
Well, best example is Breath of the Wild, which honestly, I wasn't totally in love with the first time, because I was so used to the point A to point B to point C to point, etc.
The formula.
The formula, to where after like the first part, when you get off the plateau, it's up to you what you do. You can literally go all across and you could explore all around. You don't have to go have a set formula. Whereas like one of my favorite Zelda games is Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time. Well, you're a little kid. You have to get these jewels to get the Master Sword, and then you have to go through all of these other stages. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, after you play the first like maybe 2-3 hours of the game, then it's up to you. You don't have to go to Zora's domain first. You could go to Gerudo Town, or you could go to the Rito Village. Which my kids, I've got a couple kids who've played the game. They've played it differently than what I've played it, and played it differently than how either of them have played.
And that's the beauty of it. I think
Love
that's
it.
really, again, you're creating your own experience out of it. And I think that's something that movies aren't ever really going to be able to capture in the same way. But video games are utilizing movie techniques to allow them to do what movies can't. Because video games would not exist without those capabilities, without the actual stories holding you in and grasping your attention. I can tell you, I've played a couple of games before that, picked it up, played it a little bit, and you're like, it's kind of boring.
Put it away.
Put it right back away. Played it at a friend's house. I'm like, I'm not going to buy it. Like, it didn't draw me in. And I think it was just because it didn't have that quality that I needed. I didn't feel like I was influencing anything enough for me to...
What do you think makes for a great game?
I think... For me personally, a real game, either it's got to be just outright just fun. Like you have Smash Brothers, you have Among Us that's been getting traction lately, Fall Guys, simple fun.
Yeah.
So those things are always timeless. You're always going to have fun with those things. I think it's going to be nostalgia is another good one that kind of hooks a lot of people back, because it is so always nice to revisit your favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing that I would think would be the good thing is just story, good acting, an actual story that you care about. And that's going to be different for each person. I mean,
Yeah.
again, you know, somebody may not be a big superhero person. So if they play Spider-Man and Avengers, you may not find the story that enthralling. But if you have an attachment to those characters, kind of mixing the nostalgia and that together, it's good. I would say if you're not a big thing, again, for Dana, like try Detroit Become Human. I think you may actually like it if you haven't played it yet.
I got to get through the... I guess maybe now 5 Yakuza games because I'm on Kiwami 2. I'm almost 3 down, but...
Well, what makes a good game for you?
It's different for me because I wouldn't necessarily say I'm like a hardcore gamer. I don't like to do online gaming. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm more casual. I like to just sit down and just kind of lose myself into what I'm doing and focus on that. And I really like games that let me choose the outcome. So like Detroit Human, Heavy Rain. I like games like LA Noire where it's like you got to solve the crime and, you know, what you choose dictates the outcome of the crime that you're trying to solve. And I mean, for me, I really enjoy a big variety of games. Like I can play Yakuza for 5 hours and then immediately switch to Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch for the rest of the day. Like I'm kind of taken in by everything as long as it is something that draws me in, like Forrest was saying. I'm good to go for playing it. Like I don't specifically care for anything like standard wise. Like I'll play Legend of Zelda, I'll play Sonic, like whatever, just as long as it's fun.
Well, Rich, I mean, are you finding anything different with having kids now? Are you needing certain things that grasp your whole family's attention, or is it kind of still video games something that only you're at? Or?
It's a combination of both now because for video games it's got to have a great story. I'm a big adventure, action adventure gamer guy. You know, like I love those type of games. Don't get me wrong, I still love, you know, the very fun games like Super Smash. You know, I grew up with that stuff. But I love, you know, just story in general. If it's got a great story, if it's something I could really dive into, that's why I love the Assassin's Creed games, because the stories of so many of the characters, and then like the main characters like Desmond and now some of the newer ones have been just like incredible.
Well,
right?
Stories, and I would say even with those, some of the graphics, the actual art style.
Well, the graphics get better and better every year, you know. Like, I go back, you know, like, honestly, I'll still go back and play, like, the original Assassin's Creed game, and it was a great game, don't get me wrong, but, like, compared to some of the newer ones with, you know, with the Sparta one and the Valhalla that's out, it's you know, the graphics obviously are different, but the story still sucks me in. And, you know, for me, going to your question for kids, you know, one, I can't play Assassin's Creed until the kids go to bed, you know, per my wife. But two, like it's great to see my kids get into some gaming because we got a Switch last Christmas, you know, shout out to Santa. Thanks for bringing that to us. But seeing them getting really excited about some of these games, getting excited about Zelda, getting excited about some of these Mario games, especially with Nintendo, where you could play some of the really, you know, some of the first games from NES and the Super Nintendo, some of the classic games that I definitely loved. They're starting to play it, and
well, I think for kids, a lot of it is the art style too.
It is, you know,
brighter colored games. I mean, but there's even more like really deep games that have great art styles. Here, a shout out for all the Xbox people here.
Halo is hello.
Well, Halo or Ori. Ori is a huge series. Ori and the Will of the Wisp, Ori and the Blind Forest. Those games are so beautiful, not only in soundtrack, but the way that the actual gameplay is. Your character is essentially your focus the whole time.
Yeah.
So the rest of the screen has this blur effect that is very cinematic. As far as like a camera person, I'm like, oh yeah, your foreground's blurry, or your background's blurry.
Like that depth of field.
It's the depth of field, and it's just beautiful colors and beautiful, like the emotions that you get from just a simple art style. You're like, it just draws you in even more. You're like, oh, I know Ghost of Tsushima was a big one that had beautiful scenes with the cherry blossom petals falling and leaves. And
they did the same like depth aspect you guys were just talking about. I don't know specific terms, guys. I'm on the enthusiast side of things for filmmakers.
But you notice it. You notice that the depth of field, or that feeling that it gives you of like, this game is just, you're in awe almost of the colors, of the way it looks, and that draws you in even more too.
Well, again, it goes back to, using those tactics and those strategies from the film industry to really create that feeling, because cinematography is all about creating that depth of feeling of what the film is about, or what the story is about, to really drive that emotion. You can do that with the lighting, you can do that with the focusing, you can do that with so many different things, and with video games being able to do that in such a great way.
Well, now more than ever.
Because
you couldn't back in the day with Mario and his blogs.
No. You sat
Mario
on
Party.
Or Lara Croft and her pointy assets back in the day. I mean, as much as that was beautiful, it's definitely so much better with high definition and good graphics now. So
do tell us more about those graphics.
It's definitely changed the way that it is, because you have more of appreciation for it. It's more realistic. It grounds you in these movies more, or in these games more so. Movies. See, I slipped up there.
I mean, it all
they
feels
are
like
movies.
you're watching a movie when it's the character exposition happening.
Yeah.
But then taking things into a different direction, we talk about how beautiful these things are well done, but also how scary and how real things can feel, like Resident Evil 7 Biohazard.
Right.
Oh my goodness, you could see the little maggots like on the dirty ass plates of food just like crawling around. Ugh.
Oh yeah, and then again going back to
VR
just,
game.
Yeah, and going back to what you were talking about with going back to Tomb Raider. That scene in Tomb Raider, you really felt that anxiety. Because you've dived yourself into the story so much that, and how they portrayed that scene, you feel that.
Well, it creates. I mean, Resident Evil. I remember playing as a kid. I was, back in the day when somebody had a. I will not play Resident Evil games anymore. I'm still traumatized from a kid. I think I played the Resident Evil on N64. Alone by myself for the first time ever at like late at night, and ever since then I was like, nope, I'm not playing this game unless there's somebody else in the room.
I had a similar experience, but with the GameCube version, and I loved it ever since then. I just fell in. I'm like, I love being scared. Please scare me some more.
And I love it. I love it. I just for some reason that one just hit me different when I was by myself. I think I love scary stuff. I love laughing at scary stuff though with somebody.
Oh yeah.
But it's dark, and you don't know what's like around the corner, and it creates this sense of like anxiety that Tomb Raider does, but in a different, more fearful way of like for your life almost.
Well, and then again, the technology with VR, if you remember, like my VR experience was a scary, house, which was a lot of fun, but man, you get so immersed into it. And I played it back for some of my kids. It wasn't too scary. It was like jump scares and, kind of creepy stuff.
It's good for VR.
Yes, it was great for VR, but for, my 2-year-old, I was like, okay, time to go to bed. And he like runs over to the hallway and the lights were off and he just stops until he was like, nope.
Yep.
I don't trust this.
Yeah. It's that, amazing tap into our psyche, that what filmmaking can really do for the video game industry, and then also vice versa, bringing video games into film as well.
And giving you that environment. Zombie U, they released it, I think it was on another console before, but it introduced this idea of permadeath. So it was one of those, like, you actually had this attachment to your character, because if your character died,
you lose everything.
You would lose everything you had, and you would spawn as a new character, and you'd have to go find your old body to get your stuff back, to make progress in the game. So it was a very weird, but you would see your character. You would see your character. You'd start off with a new character. You'd have to re-level up because their skills only get better as you use them. So even that gets you even more immersed. I think that's the beauty of having more time to expand, as we'd mentioned before, 20 hours, 30 hours. It gives you the chance to really delve in.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, you just love those characters because you become those characters. to where, like if there's like a sad death scene, you do cry. I will admit I've cried in some video games
Yep.
because somebody died or something happened. And
I
it's
had
like,
some tears
"No."
even in Breath of the Wild when they were like having those moments between the champions and,
Oh,
that. I
yeah.
was like, that was such well done
So
story.
well done.
And I was like,
And the writing has gotten so much better over the years too, from the 8-bit games of
that's the one
yesteryear.
It's the one thing this pandemic is never going to be able to get is some video game writing. We're not going to have any writer strikes like we did with television because you can take some more
You
time
can
on
work
some video
remotely
games.
on video game stuff too.
So
Absolutely.
keep that alive because I think if anything does suffer in the industry for film, I think video games are going to be another outlet that people are moving towards more rapidly.
They have a wider variety of things they can do without needing like a 20+ person crew to get it done. They can just have 5 or 6 people and rotate them out and just have them work and not even be in the same room.
And then also work remotely too. That's been the big thing this year. But why are we talking about this, right? Let's bring it all together. And I think the question is, what can we do? Because this is a podcast about filmmaking, right? So what can we learn from the video games?
I think the biggest thing they can take out of it is story writing. I think that's going to be the best way that they can merge kind of the two worlds together slightly and benefit from one another, because video games, like I said, they have a wider spectrum of things they can do, like the Mafia series 1, 2, and 3. They're all different time periods, but they're able to release them in such a way that it doesn't take so long to, kind of create that realism with it. And they also have amazing story writing in it. Like, I feel like I can sit down and watch the cutscenes from the video games and feel like I'm watching a movie. For me, that's like the biggest thing.
A great video game that actually has done amazing with that, I think one of the better games is Kingdom Hearts. Mm-hmm. Like some of the Kingdom Hearts, you could sit there and watch all the cutscenes from start to finish, and it is a movie. It is like 3 hours long just to get through all the cutscenes without all of the gameplay in between. It just goes from boom, 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 cut A to cut B. I think you're right. Yeah, story is a big thing. I think we could learn a lot from how they framed certain scenes and try to recreate those moods and go, wow, how did they do that? Because you read, maybe you don't read the credits of video games. I sometimes do, sometimes don't. But you see that they do have very similar job titles in video games than they do in movies. They have a director. They have a second unit. They have grips. They have, best boy,
And I think if anything, they really do need to try to hone in on this idea of, creating a world around it. So, I mean, you see, Marvel's doing this as a good example where they have Marvel games for their heroes as well as the movies. So they're kind of integrating that together. But finding a way in future films to make people feel like they have more of an influence on it. I think there's a couple of experiments people have done with social media kind of movies where it's kind of episodic in nature. So I think that's more where TVs are kind of going more influenced that way. But if they can manage to find some sort of way that people are able to latch in and have a direct control over this or feel like they have more of a direct control, I think that's going to be where you can capture that video game audience more so than you've never had before.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, amazing talk today. Thank you for listening to Vibe Check. We are definitely geeks in our own right of video games and filmmaking, as you probably are too. And let us know what some of your favorite video games are and the storytelling behind it and how you feel like that, that has helped you maybe even in your filmmaking journey and how you view films as well moving forward. But until next time, everybody, keep vibing.
Bye, guys.
Play all the video games, always.
And
forever.
recommend some good ones, please.
Yes. Bye. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, I know. A little corny. Well, thanks for joining us on the episode, and thank you for the support you've been giving us on this channel. Now, if it's your first time visiting and you like the episode, be sure to hit that like button and follow and subscribe to know when we drop the latest episode every Friday. plus new content coming out very, very soon. Also, let us know how we are doing by sending us a shout out in the comments below, and tell us what some of your favorite video games that you like, as far as the storytelling or the cinematography, or even just the games that you just enjoy playing. Let us know. Thanks again for joining us here on the Vibe Media channel, and as always, keep creating, build your brand, and go out there and tell your story.